Readers Entertainment Radio presents Booklights with your host, author Lisa Kessler. Booklights, where we're shining a light on good books.
Hello, everybody. It's Monday again. Can you believe it? If you're in the United States listening, it's Thanksgiving this week. How can that be? Yesterday was New Year's Day. But anyway, it's been quite a year. But I'm very excited because while you're getting ready for your turkey and all that kind of thing, we have Georgie Blalock on, and she's actually a friend of mine. She's a fellow San Diego author, so we've written together and hung out, and so it's always fun for me to have somebody on that I know. Georgie has a brand new book out, and if you haven't read her yet, you're in for a big treat, but I'll read her bio here for you. Georgie Blalock is an amateur historian and a movie buff who loves combining her different passions through historical fiction and a healthy dose of period piece films. When not writing, she can be found prowling the nonfiction history section at the library or the British film listings on Netflix. Georgie also writes historical romance under the pen name Georgie Lee, and I did put a link to the Georgie Lee website and also to the Georgie Blalock website right there on Blog Talk. So if you're listening live, you can click on those anytime and sign up for her newsletter and find her on Facebook. She's also got a new Instagram account as well, so check her out and get hooked up. Always cool things being posted there. So Georgie, are you there?
I am. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yay, I'm so glad you could be here. For people who don't know, when writers are friends, we come around and we talk about books and we talk about burning things down, but we were all so excited when Georgie got to write this book about Princess Margaret. You want to tell people about the other Windsor girl?
I do. Thank you so much. Yeah, this is a story of Princess Margaret, who was sort of the Princess Diana of her time, and she's kind of largely forgotten now because of the duchesses that have come up and all that kind of stuff. But she was sort of the first, paparazzi princess. She was the first one that the media was absolutely in love with, followed her everywhere, covered her. Because at the end of World War II, Britain went into austerity and rationing, and it was kind of dreary and drab. And then she was 19 in 1949, and she was gorgeous, and she would wear all these beautiful Dior gowns, and she was living the high life with all her aristocratic friends. And so she was great tabloid fodder because she was beautiful and young. And then to follow that up, she decided to become rather scandalous. And so it was sort of that perfect storm of, I'm going to be gorgeous, but I'm also going to kind of make a name for myself. And so the book is about Spera Strathmore, who is this impoverished daughter of a minor nobleman, who, after kind of losing her way after World War II, sort of becomes famous by association by becoming the second lady in waiting to Princess Margaret. And so she's sort of thrust into this world of the glamour and the parties. But she also sees all the kind of ugly behind-the-scenes stuff about Margaret's life, because the problem with Margaret is that she and her sister were never meant to be the heir and the spare. Their uncle was supposed to become king, and he was supposed to go off and get married and have kids. And when he abdicated, it just changed everything for both of them. So she went from being the favorite second daughter to being this spare that every time Queen Elizabeth had a kid, she just got bumped farther and farther down the line of importance. And she just became forgotten, but she didn't want to be forgotten. And the only way that she could not be forgotten was to kind of act out, because in that day and age, there was really nothing else she could do. She couldn't go get a job. She couldn't, just shine in any other way. And so she became very outrageous in her speech and in her behavior, and she kind of went down in legendary as one of the most notorious royals of the 20th century.
Well, I didn't know anything about her till I started watching The Crown. And for anybody out there who is a fan of that show, it's a fabulous show. But
Great
I remember
show.
In season 2 when she was supposed to take her princess picture, and they wanted her in all these fancy poofy gowns and a crown and all that, and then she ended up giving them the naked picture in the bathtub.
Yes.
and I was like, that can't be true. And I was on Wikipedia. Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah, that was true.
So
and not only is it true, but I used that in the book. Yeah, I used that in the book because that was what was so much fun about writing her, is like she just provided so much material that it, you know, it got to the point where it's like, gosh, you know, you want to include everything and you can't. So, you know, that was one of the things I did include in the book is, yeah, it was totally scandalous. But at the same time, it was interesting because she was kind of understanding that cusp of change because it was right at the end of the 50s. You're getting ready to go into the swinging 60s, you know, especially Maud London. And she kind of picked up on that and really went with it, but it clashed so hard with her image as the proper princess, and these aren't the things you're supposed to do, and she did them, and she was the first to do them. So,
right. Well, and also from watching The Crown, I had no idea that there were so many cycles of England not knowing what to do with their royals. You know, do we want to get rid of them? What do we do? And then the royals trying to navigate, you know, how do we tell the people that we're human too and all that kind of thing. And I feel like Princess Margaret kind of got that before the rest of them did. I mean, she was very playful and fun, and everyone wanted to be like her instead of, you know, a stodgy king and queen kind of thing.
She did, but it was just such almost the wrong time to get that because they were not out of the old ways. Like the whole Downton Abbey manners, upstairs, downstairs stuff still existed, but and she was still supposed to follow those rules. But, yeah, the world was changing. And I think The Crown does a really good job of showing that kind of contrast between how do you keep the aura of the monarchy and at the same time be relatable to this new generation. And I think that, you know, the powers that be, I think she had a good sense of that, but the powers that be didn't, and it caused a lot of problems, especially for her, in that, you know, maybe they followed her lead in a few things, not everything, but in a few things, you know, they might have got things a little bit more correct. But it's just an interesting time period because it's change. It's just massive change that they kind of couldn't keep up with and didn't know how to deal with.
Right.
But I had a lot of fun with her character.
I bet, and I didn't even know that she had ladies in waiting, but they still had those in 1950. They had a lady in waiting.
They still do.
Wow.
I don't think the princesses.
They still do.
I don't know if. Well, I think they probably do. I know the Queen still does because I read a couple of biographies or autobiographies of people that had served her, and I know she still does because, you know, when they go places, they hand them flowers, and she has to have somebody to hand them to, or I don't think they still have the same kind of like super involved in their life role that they had earlier in the 20th century, but they do still exist. As for whether or not, you know, the new duchesses have them, I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah.
My book didn't go that far, so I didn't do
just
that kind of research.
Right. Yeah. Now, next book.
Next book. Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, when I watch other shows like The Tudors and stuff like that, the ladies in waiting like have, you know, purposes as far as, you know, the queen got to decide who gets married to which lady and all that. Was Princess Margaret doing that too?
To a lesser degree. In the book, and this is based on a real event, I can't remember the name of what her original lady in waiting was, but when they got married, she stepped down from that post. If you're an older woman and your kids are kind of grown up and out of the house, it doesn't matter that you're married. But if you're younger like that, you know, back in the 40s and 50s, once you got married, that was it. You were done. And so that's how in the book Vera ends up stepping into her place because her real lady in waiting did step down. But it was interesting because, you know, back then they had what they called like social secretaries, and these are the people that kept your calendar and dealt with invitations and organized your schedule and all that sort of stuff. And so
why don't we have one of those?
I need one of those. If anybody wants to, you know, step forward and do that, I would love that. You know,
email her.
What I really like is what I'd really like is the cook and the house cleaners and, you know, the person that's going to take care of all that stuff that I don't want to do. But sadly, I'm a mere mortal, so.
Yes. Sadly, we can't pay for them. But if you wanted to do it for free.
Hey, yeah, I know. I wouldn't stop anybody, let me tell you. But, yeah, so they had these social secretaries, and they really were very intimately involved in their lives because they planned out their day. And sometimes in an effect, sometimes they had a little bit more control over the person because, you know, depending if it was a very, very official engagement, it didn't matter if Princess Margaret wanted to go do something else. If she had to go open a factory, she had to go open a factory, and that was a social secretary that kind of dealt with that. But they had so many people. I mean, she had a dresser, someone that dressed her, things like that.
Wow.
And a lot of times, like even the Queen doesn't pick out her own outfits. That was an interesting fact. Is she has dressers.
Even
and
now?
The ones that decide. Yeah, even now. There's
Wow.
people that decide. And they decide, like, what color she'll wear, because if she's in a crowd, they want her to stand out, because if you've been waiting hours to see her, and, you don't want to be disappointed if she's wearing gray and it's a gray day and you can't see her. So, yeah, it's amazing just even now how much say these people have in their lives. And it was even worse back then.
Wow, yeah, because I just have no idea that these traditions keep, that they're still alive today.
Oh, I know. That was interesting, because with all my historical romances, especially like not just traditions, but like people, because I know with my historical romances, whenever I'm dealing with people, I don't really have to worry about whether or not they're still around.
Right.
And so that was an interesting part of it, is not just the traditions, but like the amount of people from that era who are still with us. And so that was neat. Just seeing
Were you able to connect with anybody like biographers or anybody who has talked to the people who are still alive, or did you just do it through research?
I just did it through research, because in the end, even though she's Princess Margaret, in this book, she's my character. She's my fictional version of her, and I really wanted it to be my version of her, not anybody else's.
Oh, okay.
And so I just read as much as I could to get a feel and a sense for it. But then in the end, it was, how it is. It all goes in, and then
Right.
It comes out, and that's how she came out for me. So I wanted to stay true to her, but at the same time, like I said, she's still my character. And I also wanted that flexibility to kind of play around with her and to just have fun. I had a lot of fun with this book. It was a lot of fun. A lot of research, but a lot of fun.
Are there rules in historical fiction of, like, what things need to be real and what things you can make up? Like, you must have made up events between her and Vera because she was fictional. She was your character, right? I mean,
right.
Are there like guidelines for how many fictional things you can make up, or how many real things you need to put in, or do you just go with your gut?
I went with my gut, but at the same time, I tried to stay as real as I could, because I have heard, not for readers on this book, but like other readers who read other historical fictions, that they're willing to take a certain amount of artistic license, but you have to be a little careful to not take huge amounts of artistic license. It has to feel real for that time. I think it really, like, if you do take those leaps, it has to feel real for that time, and it has to feel real to that character and stuff. So there were a lot of things that, even though there were interactions with her and Vera, I would have it revolve around something that happened for real. But I do in the end of the book and in the afterwards, I do talk about what is real and what isn't real, and where I took some artistic license, especially with characters, and I try to point out where things deviated, because I mean, I do that. I go and I read historical fiction, or I go watch a TV show, and I'm like, wow, did that really happen? And then you're on Google real quick, and you're like, oh wow, it did, or oh no, that totally didn't. So I don't want somebody to get pulled out of the story because they're like, oh my gosh, that would never happen. But at the same time, as well as I do, like history, people, that more was going on than we think. Nobody was just sitting around eating crumpets all the time. Stuff was happening.
Yeah, I was telling you, I was watching Versailles on Netflix, and it was just so, I was like, there is no way. And then I look it up on Wikipedia. I'm like, wow, we've been crazy for a really long time.
We have been. It's like I was saying before, we've just hidden it a lot better, so that we've sort of forgotten just how nuts we all were. And sometimes not that long ago. And so it's just trying to stay real to the flavor of that era or what was going on. But yeah, I took a lot of license because it is fiction.
Yeah.
That's the thing you have to remember, is it is fiction. So
Right. But when I think historical fiction is really cool when you can weave in actual events like the picture in the bathtub, stuff like that, because as a reader anyway, for me, like I can remember reading Memoirs of a Geisha, and they did not I felt like, even though it said a novel on the front, it was so historical, and I felt like at least some of these people, and then at the very end they were like, nope, none of these people. I was really let down, and it was funny that I saw a bunch of reviewers who said the same darn thing. They're like, how could none of these people, they couldn't put in any historical, and so I think it's cool that you wrote that at the end of what's real and what was not. And
well, yeah, because everybody's rushing to Google. To find out, like, did that really happen? Was that really the way it was? And so, yeah, sometimes it's kind of nice to give a bit of a heads up, because I've done that too. I read the book The Exception, and it's all about Kaiser Wilhelm at the beginning of World War II, and I remember reading that thinking, is this real? And going and looking, and no, most of it wasn't. But the writer did such a good job with taking what the history part of it and the research, and then making it very believable. And I think that's one of the great things about the historical fiction is being able to kind of play what if. Like, here's history, here's what we all know, but what if? And like you said before, sometimes real history is just wacky enough to seem like fiction.
Yeah, it's salacious enough that you could go, wow, this is a soap opera, and then I look it up on Wikipedia. Oh, wait, that really happened.
Oh, that really happened. Yeah, I know, and it's great. And that was what was so much fun with her, is because there was so much good stuff and so much to draw on. Because one of the other questions a lot of people always ask me is, do you feel constrained by the history? And every once in a while, a little bit, like if there's something I want to do and you look it up and you're like, oh, that didn't happen until well after my book is done, or whatever. And so every once in a while, but I always pull a lot of inspiration from what happened, because there are such great stories, and there's just so many wonderful little recollections by other people about the way things happened and the way things might have been, that it gives you so much to play with, and then you just have fun with it.
Yeah, I remember when you told me you were writing this book, I had been watching the first 2 seasons of The Crown, and I had told you that it was so shocking to me how much Princess Margaret smoked. Oh my gosh,
yeah,
just on the show,
right?
it's distracting, all the smoking, and you told me, oh, she was a chimney, and I was like,
oh
really?
Yeah, she was a huge chimney.
Because their dad died of cancer, right?
Well, yeah, so you would think that she wouldn't have smoked like that, but wow.
Right.
Well, one of the things she was known for, and it's actually on the cover of my book, is she has this cigarette holder, and I mentioned it in the book. It's on the cover of the book. There are pictures of her. She was the first royal to be seen in public, or the first royal woman to be seen in public smoking, because women could light up, but you weren't supposed to do it in public. And she did. But I think that was that whole part of her being a rebel and, just doing things differently. She also drank heavily.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of drinking, too. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's like when you watch old movies. I love old Hollywood. And I love watching movies, but it's amazing how often I'll go back and watch something I haven't seen in a really long time, like 1939's The Women, and it's like, wow, put the cigarettes down just for like 2 minutes. Or like, it's 10 o'clock in the morning, hey, would you like a cocktail? Yeah, sure. I'm like, oh my God, how did anybody get anything done back then?
Right? Yeah, you go in your doctor's office and they have cigarettes sitting there. Oh my gosh.
I'm trying to remember what else it was. I can't remember what it was, but it was something very historic, and there's this picture, and something very historic's going on, and you can tell the 2-minute pose, and there's cigarettes hanging out of their mouths. You're just like, really? For that 5 seconds, you couldn't have taken the cigarette out of your mouth?
Put that down? Yeah.
Just put it down? But yeah, it's just amazing. But yeah, I love watching old movies for that reason. But yeah, she smoked and drank something fierce. She liked Famous Grouse whiskey. That was her favorite. And I remember thinking this was I don't know why this fact surprised me, but it sort of did. She liked this stuff called Malvern water, and it was bottled water. And I remember when I first did the research, like, wow, I didn't realize bottled water went back that far. Like, it's kind of a silly fact, But you're like, oh, okay. Because I don't know about you, but I always think
was
of
like an 80s thing.
That's what I thought. Like Perrier, remember when that came out, and that was like the big thing.
Yeah.
I thought it was
and
too.
And I was like, really?
Yeah, right. Bottled water, right? Yeah. Now we're all like rushing out to buy it, but yeah.
Exactly.
But there's these stories of her that she loved this Malvern water, and it was basically bottled water. And when she would travel and go to house parties, they would have to serve her cocktail first, and she liked her famous Grouse whiskey and her Malvern water. And there's stories of her where somebody just tries to give her, tap water, and she's like, oh, no, I got to have my Malvern water. And because of her rank, you couldn't serve anybody else till you served her first. And so they'd have to get her. Yeah, right? And so they'd have to get her footmen to go track down like a bottle of Malvern water. And he talked in his memoirs about how if it ran out, he just put tap water in it, and then he had a way of like getting the seal to look like it hadn't been open, and they'd give it to her. And she'd
oh my God! I can't believe we put that in this memoir.
I know, right? That was some of the great stories like that. I don't think that made it into my book, but that's some of the great stories where you're like, gosh, I wish I could use this somewhere in this story, but I can't. So, like I think I mentioned the Malvern water and the whiskey, but the footman just giving her tap water and she didn't know the difference. That didn't make it in there. But there was great stories like that. She was full of that stuff.
Yeah. Well, and I think about her when I'm watching the show. I think about both her and Elizabeth, really, that, this wasn't the life either of them thought they were going to have.
Right.
But there doesn't seem like there's any way out. You don't get a choice. I mean, a rough life, you get to be super rich, but
I know, right?
Seriously. They don't get to go work in a coffee shop or be an actor or
do
their
anything.
life just got decided for them, and that in a way it's kind of like they're a bird in a diamond cage,
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
right,
yes, they have all of
yeah.
these privileges, but they never got a choice in the life that they got handed. No wonder she drank so much.
That was the whole thing with the abdication of her uncle David. Is if you read a lot of stuff about him, he didn't really want it. He wanted out. And there was a lot of speculation that the whole Wallis Simpson thing was just he saw that as his exit and he took it. And
marrying the divorced woman.
Right. That when it came down to the abdication, that he never wanted to be king. That was kind of his way of giving up on it. But the amount of damage that did to the monarchy, I mean, it wasn't like just okay, I'm not going to be king and I just leave. It created so many problems and so many difficulties, but he took that way out. But it's interesting because Margaret, and I talk about this in the book, she was given an out. When it came to marrying Captain Townsend, they said, you can go marry him if you want, but you have to give up being a princess, and you have to give up all this stuff, and you can go just be Mrs. Townsend, knock yourself out. And, in the end, she did not choose that. She chose to hang on to being a princess. And I mean, part of it was her family. I mean, she was very close to her sister, despite the differences and the difficulties they had. Because one of the things we read about them growing up, they didn't have a lot of friends. It was sort of just the two of them. I'm not sure why, but that was kind of how it was. I mean, it was to the point that at some point one of their governesses said, let's create a Girl Scout troop here in the Buckingham Palace just so they can meet some other girls their age. But the reality is they didn't have a lot of friends, so it was sort of just the two of them growing up. And so, yeah, it would have been impossible for her to walk away from her family like that. But, all the trappings of royalty were something that I think gave her life meaning and gave her purpose when she was living in a life that had no meaning and had no purpose. Because if they'd have been boys, she probably would have gone into the military as the younger son and done something. But at that time, there was nothing for her to do, and nobody knew what to do with her. And so and I think The Crown does a really good job of showing her. She's basically living at her mom's house with nothing to do. So she sits around all day smoking, drinking, and watching TV. And when you're, granted that sounds like fun for like a day, but, when you're in your early 20s and maybe you want to get out and experience some life and do some stuff, that's not fun. That's not good.
Right.
And so I think that was part of her thing about taking such pride in the fact that she was royal and being able to kind of like throw her weight around, like the whole thing with the Malvern water and wanting her drink a specific way. It's like when that's all you've got, you're going to exploit that, and she did. But it was interesting that when she had the chance to walk away, she didn't. So would have been interesting if she had.
What was that? Maybe your biggest surprise? When you were researching her, what was your biggest surprise about Margaret?
Oh, I think just how genuinely unhappy she was. Just how pointless her life was during you're in your 20s. She was in her 20s. She was young. She had a lot of energy, and she just had nothing and nowhere to put it and nothing to do with it because she was so overlooked. I mean, even when her dad died and the country was talking about mourning and they would read out the prayers in church, and they would pray for Queen Elizabeth and they'd pray for the Queen Mom because she was a widow. They never said anything about Margaret. She was just sort of this forgotten, pushed to the side person because by that point she was no longer the heir. She because the Queen had Charles and Anne, so she was no longer the heir. So who was she? She was just sort of nothing and forgotten. And I think that was very surprising. It's just how lonely and pointless a life it really was, and how much that affected her and her character, and how that shaped who it was that she became. And why it is she did act out. Because, if you can't get attention any other way, you'll get it where you can get it.
That's right. That's what they tell you about toddlers. They'd rather
exactly,
get
right?
bad attention
Toddlers
than no
are princesses.
attention.
Yeah, exactly. And bad attention is good attention, And especially at a time when the press was really into her. Because if you don't have the press paying attention to you and you're not in the public eye, you're really nobody, And so she manipulated that as well, but a lot of it was the bad press. But like you said, any attention is good attention.
Right. Well, we talked about it briefly at the beginning, but you also have written a bunch of historical romances too. And how different was it to write historical fiction than to write historical romance? You still have to do a bunch of research for both, right?
Right. Well, with the historical romance, I've done 15 books for Harlequin, and all but 2 of them are set in the Regency. So which is, the Jane Austen era. So, roughly 1790 to about 1820. And, when you've done that many, that era really well. So you still have to do research, but usually it's like research about something specific. Like when I did the one about the fossil hunters, I had to go research about the fossils. But when it comes to the day-to-day stuff and the clothing and the carriages and all that, I'm very familiar with that world. And so it's not quite as research heavy. Whereas with the other Windsor Girl, obviously it's a whole new era, and it's just far enough in the past, but not that far. So every so often I'd have to look something up about, what technology there was, and and the thing with romance is the structure is different, it is and it isn't. It's kind of hard to explain, but the idea of a dark moment, the idea of a character facing their greatest fear, I still used all of that I had learned in romance in The Other Windsor Girl. So with the main character, Vera Strathmore, I gave her greatest fear, and then I just had that every character that she encounters then plays on that. Whereas in romance, it would be the hero playing on that. The hero sort of forcing the heroine to face her greatest fear, or vice versa. And then, having the dark moment when the greatest fear is realized. So I do that with Vera, and I do that in the book. But instead of just having one character playing, I have all of them in situations, and Princess Margaret. And then I have Vera face her greatest fear and have her dark moment, and then, go on from there. So, and also what was interesting about The Other Windsor Girl is it's one POV. It's the third limited, but it's just Vera's POV, and I had never done that before. And so that was when I first started out, part of me was like, wow, how am I going to do this for 90 pages, 90,000 words?
Right.
Because I'd never done it before. And it worked out. It was fine. But there was a moment at the beginning where, like, wow, I've never done this before. How interesting.
Yeah. Well, I'm so excited for you, and I can't believe we're running out of time, but I'm so excited for you. I saw today The Other Windsor Girl was still #1 biographical fiction on Amazon, so biographical historical fiction. So, so cool. So I hope everybody who's listening will go grab a copy. And how should people follow you? Do you have a newsletter? How do you want readers to find you?
I think Instagram is probably, even though I'm new to it, I'm really liking it. So the @Georgie Blalock on Instagram is a really good one. Or they can go to my website, GeorgieBlalock.com. If they are interested in my historical romances, it's Georgie-Lee.com. And those are probably the best ways to follow me. Because Instagram, I'm new to it, but I'm enjoying it. I'm really having a lot of fun with that.
Well, thank you so much for being here. It was so fun. We'll have to do it again next book.
Definitely. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, see you later.
Thanks for joining us on Booklights. Be sure to connect with us at www.readersentertainment.com for articles, blogs, videos, and podcasts that matter to readers.
The Hollywood Reporter is your ultimate source for awards race news this fall. Go to THR.com to keep up with this award season's expert predictions from executive editor Scott Feinberg, and tune into the Hollywood Reporter's Awards Chatter podcast for exclusive interviews with the biggest names in showbiz. Stay in the loop with daily newsletters providing real-time updates on all the awards action. Subscribe to THR.com for full access to the Hollywood Reporter and never miss a moment of this fall awards season. Visit THR.com today.
It can get lonely climbing Mount McKinley, so to entertain myself, I go to ChumbaCasino.com. At Chumba Casino, I can play hundreds of online casino-style games for free, like online slots, bingo, Slingo, and more. Plus, I get a daily login bonus. It's just too bad that up here, I don't have anyone to share my excitement with. Woohoo! Woohoo!
Live the Chumba life. Anytime, anywhere. Play for free now at ChumbaCasino.com. VGW Group. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.